Hi, everybody. KC here. So, you may recall that sometime last year I did an interview with Jennifer Johnson, who was starting a business called Trestle. And Trestle had this really unique sort of business model. The idea is they were going to be able to look at brands and figure out where they ranked in terms of various sorts of socially conscious criteria, and then using software allow me as a consumer to know where they rank in terms of those criteria, in terms of what's important to me. So if I think how they pay their people is more important than their environmental consciousness, I can see it come up that way. It was really the essence of targeted marketing and looking at a world where social consciousness is important to people. Well, the world has changed a lot since I first interviewed Jennifer, and I thought it'd be worth kind of revisiting with her a little bit. We did a little Skype conversation the other day to talk about how her business is developing and to sort of figure out where does social consciousness rank in a world where the most relevant thing right now is where do I find toilet paper? Where do I find hand sanitizer? Is this going to be as relevant to people? Will it be as high a priority to people going forward as she thought it would be 6, 8, 10 months ago when was really launching her business? I thought it'd be an interesting conversation. I continue to believe the social consciousness is going to be important for companies. I think they need to be right on the issues and they have to be transparent about where they're right on the issues. I think that's incredibly important. And so I thought we'd sit down and talk. Here's that conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Jennifer, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Hey,
I wrote about Trestle when I first met you during one of my Portland adjunctivities. I think it's a really interesting business model in terms of allowing consumers to sort of determine the criteria by which they want to judge businesses, brands, beyond just price and availability and things like that. But since, as everybody knows, since I first covered you on Morning Newsbeat, the world has gone through something of a revolution, right? So you were starting to build this business and test out your theories in a thriving economy. I think it's fair to say the economy is not thriving quite the same way it was. People are getting laid off. Businesses are shuttered temporarily. A lot of those businesses are going to be shuttered permanently, I suspect. So I guess my big question to you is, do you think that a focus on social responsibility, whatever that means to a consumer, is going to have quite the same currency at a time when we're going to be digging ourselves out of a hole as opposed to standing on top of a hill?
yeah. Well, first of all, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you about these topics. You asked some of my favorite questions. So yeah, I would argue that it will probably be one of the more important currencies. We're currently going through something that's pretty unique for our generation. We are experiencing something where at the core of our current experience, we're interconnected with each other. So people are going through trauma. Like you said, there's layoffs. Businesses are closing, if not for temporarily, possibly permanent. And the companies that are going to survive this and be able to make it through are the ones that are going to be able to connect with the consumer when the consumer has the ability to spend money in a way that connects with them. So once we're past survival mode, which we're currently still in place, we're currently still just trying to survive and figure this thing out, make sure that we can pay our rent. Once our rent is paid and we're able to feed ourselves and our families, like who gets to survive past that? And so yeah, I think that right now, because of what we're experiencing, it's actually, my guess is going to speed up the timeline of getting to a place where social responsibility and response to community is going to play an even larger role in how we as consumers spend and buy as we're coming out of this. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, I am both older than you and more cynical. And I wonder. I mean, I'm not sure that I would like to agree with you. I'd like to think that retailers, brands, let's not just say retailers, but I think that brands, one of the ways they're going to be able to continue to differentiate themselves, especially as we get to the end of whatever this is. And I think that's part of the problem with this right now, right? We don't really know what this is is and how long it's going to last and what it's going to take to resolve so many of the issues that we're dealing with. I mean, I do think they're going to have to find ways to differentiate themselves, and I want to agree with you. I mean, I want to believe, in the words of the X-Files, right, that people will still think that social responsibility is important. I think that it's, but I do also think that it's going to be important for brands to persuade customers of that. In other words, I don't know that customers, consumers, shoppers will come to that on their own. I think that brands are going to need to make that argument that, okay, we've gotten past the point where the most relevant thing to you is being able to find toilet paper, right? You've got all the toilet paper you need. Now we need to move beyond that and talk about the world in a broader context. And maybe, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think that consumers are actually going to come out of this feeling that the world is maybe a more fragile place than they thought it was, and therefore they better take care of themselves, better take care of the planet, better do socially responsible things, because they all of a sudden they've come face to face with not Armageddon and not an apocalypse, but certainly a life-changing experience.
Yeah. Excuse me.
I hope it's not coronavirus.
I know. I was trying to prevent all my coughing. We'll have to see. I mean, we're 2 months into this, really, maybe a month and a half at best, and so we really still have to see. I think that there's so much going on that there's potential for that. That, for example, like some of the Earth is healing overnight. We're able to see LA skyline. We're able to see the Himalayas.
I know, that's the most extraordinary thing to me, that we've got suddenly air in all these cities, all these places is cleaner than it has ever been.
It's incredible.
And it happened so fast.
So fast.
It didn't take a year. It took a month or 2 months. And it's like, okay, are we going to learn from this or not?
That's the question. Like, are we going to be so inspired by the fact that we can now see the Himalayas, or that there's dolphins swimming up in the Venice canals, that we can realize that if we just behave a little differently? Okay, to be fair, this is a major change, and this is not something that I think we are going to sustain to this degree for a long term. But what it's showing us is so clearly and so quickly how we behave as a society and as individuals severely impacts the world, the environment, all of this. It's all so interconnected. But to answer your question, will the world appear more fragile, or will our economy appear more fragile? I mean, how could we not think that? How could we not think that in the moment a virus can come along and all of a sudden the way of life that we've been building is to some degree shattered, and now we have to re-pick up pieces and re-put pieces back together in a hopefully post-pandemic world kind of way, where we build a new puzzle, put a new puzzle together. We still have to figure out what that looks like.
That's a great image. I love that image, because I do think there's a lot of people out there who, when they think about, they call it the new normal. When we get back to, retailers don't, when things go back to normal, they say to me. And that works on the premise that when they put the pieces of the puzzle back together, the puzzle is going to look the same. That's such a great image that you just provided, because when you put the pieces back to the puzzle, it probably will look completely different. And we may have more of a role in determining what that puzzle looks like than we might have thought we had 6 months or a year ago. That's a really good image. I don't know if you can work that into your business presentation, but I think it's a terrific image. How much do you think this is generational? My generation versus your generation. Do you think that your generation will, and I know you can't speak for all of them, but is it your sense that your generation will learn these lessons in a more profound way than maybe people who are a lot older than you would?
So I am a millennial, and my team is made up of millennials. I honestly think that the millennial generation, at least my portion of it, my 5 years where I graduated college in 2009 when the economy was in collapse and there were no jobs. And we've not been able to really recover from student loans. We can't really buy houses. My section of generation is really struggling. We've been in survival mode our entire lives, essentially. We haven't really been able to get past survival mode. I actually think it's going to be the generation below me. I think Gen Z is probably the smartest generation of any of us. And they're the ones that are able to, in their brain, make the connections between I behave this way, the world responds this way, I care about the world, I'm going to behave in a way that the world becomes what I want it to be. Because I see my direct impact having a result that I want, that I can now see very closely connected. So I do think there is some generational aspects, especially prior to the virus hitting and really hurting our economy. But I would have to interview people and ask, but I bet that the interconnectedness is more seen than it used to be. That the American ideal of individualism might break down a little bit in that I, as an individual, now am being forced to see the role that I play in society and how it impacts others and how other behaviors impact me.
Well, it's interesting because you would think that at some level, if the argument is we all need to feel a greater responsibility for each other and in a broader sense, the planet, than maybe we have felt in the past. The notion that I should wear a mask when I go to the supermarket, not because it protects me, but it helps me not infect other people if I happen to be carrying the virus. That's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
It's I'm not doing this to protect me, I'm doing this to protect you.
Yep.
And if you wear one, you're doing it to protect me, which is why I find it fascinating when you go to the store and you see somebody not wearing a mask. And to me, and it's really funny. I mean, it's almost like what is it, a Rorschach test, right? You're not wearing a mask, you know something about that person. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe they just left it home. But I have to admit that I think that now when I see people in the stores. And so maybe we do come out of this if we learn the lessons from it with a greater sense of interconnectivity. So one of the things I noticed that you did now on my Trestle, you've developed this whole algorithm which allows me to pick the criteria that I think are most important. So when I go to brands that you have actually evaluated, you are then it tells me how they rank, right, based on your vetting. So my question, I guess, what I'm wondering, I wanted to ask you about, you've added something new. So you've just added a small business override, I think you call it.
Yeah.
What is that? Tell me why that was important.
So
I want you to take care of that cough.
Yeah, no, same. It's been since the beginning of March. So it's just kind of lingering. So which, makes it imperative that I wear a mask, because even if I don't have something, it appears like I might. So prior to this, we had 7 values that we were looking at. Those were environmental impact, labor practices, animal treatment, use of natural products, where the products were made, and level of transparency. And those are still important. People still care about those. However, in this moment, we just personally see the dire need of small businesses right now. There's a lot of small businesses that are not prepared to operate in a world like this. They didn't have their e-commerce system set up. They don't have a following online. So they're struggling really, probably more severely than maybe others who have those systems set up. So this was something that was always going to be part of our roadmap. We always believed that small businesses may be a value of people's. And we just realized that now's the time. If we're going to implement it, now would be the time. Because if we're going to help small businesses.
Small business mean local? Does it always mean local, or does it not always mean local?
That's a good question. To us, they're separate values that sometimes work together. So people may want to support their local small businesses. that's the case. So we've added both of those features in. So you can say my zip code is this. I want to support small businesses in my area, or I care about small businesses in general and I want to help small businesses no matter where they are. So both of those are options. And we're seeing that as our, just looking around Portland, we're seeing the small businesses struggle and we're hearing the plight of them. And we're also seeing, and this is anecdotally, it's just paying attention to social media, the news, talking to people, that we as individuals, we're going through this crisis, and the best thing we can do for each other is stay home, which is not a comfortable response. We want to take an active role in helping. And so we're trying to create this ability for, if you want to help, here's a way you might be able to do that, is to create a system so that when you buy something, if there is a local or a small business equivalent, a similar product at a similar price, here's the easiest way to buy it from them instead of where you might have already gone.
So, give me, I'm trying to work my head around how does it affect. So I go on your site and I see, and I can use the small business override, and then that will tell me. So if I go, I'm going to pick a big name just because it's easy. I go to Nike site because I'm looking for sneakers. You will then at least let me know that Nike, well, in your case, Nike is a local business, right? But it's certainly not a small business.
Right.
You will let me know that Nike is a big business. If I want to do business with a small business, here are my 3 options in the Portland area. And right now it would be all e-commerce because nobody can go to a store. But that's essentially how it works.
Yeah. So if you land on a product, or if you go to Nike and you're looking at a pair of shoes, we can pop up a similar product. So a similar pair of shoes at a similar price. That's our promise to our users, from a company, from either a small business. If you've chosen override, it would be either a small business or a local business to you. And that way you can either choose it or you don't have to, but you at least now know that those small businesses, A, exist, B, have a product that you're currently looking for and willing to spend money on, and C, you didn't have to go looking for them and find them, even though they would likely be very hard to find online. So yeah, that's exactly right.
Right. So you have not, at this point, as we talk, you have not gotten into the food business yet. You have been mostly doing clothing, right? Am I correct about that?
Yeah, so apparel, accessories, shoes, right. Games, toys, books, competitive spaces, competitive online, so competitive e-commerce product categories.
So does the current situation where e-grocery has gone from 3-4% to 20-25% of sales? My friend Tom Furphy likes to say that basically the pandemic propelled them 2 or 3 years into the future, which is one of the reasons they're actually struggling to keep up, because even Amazon didn't have the infrastructure to keep up with what's going on now. Does that accelerate your plans to kind of look at the food business, recognizing that it's probably hard to do new things at a time when the economy's in sort of free fall?
I think when the economy is in a free fall is when you got to get creative in order to survive. But with food, the tricky part about food is that it's so personal. We consume it, and I take that responsibility very seriously. So if I'm representing food, or if I'm representing a product that goes into somebody else's body, I just feel a lot of responsibility for making sure that the way that it's represented is accurate. Not to say that doesn't apply to what we're doing, but where we're at currently is being able to speak to company-wide policies. We're not quite at the product level. So for this to work really well for food, I personally believe that we have to be able to be at product level where ingredients are taken into consideration. And so but I feel the pressure. To be honest, ever since I've been talking to you, I've been feeling the pressure of being able to help consumers understand the food space better. I personally want to understand this food space better. I just don't understand it well enough. But also I see a lot of small businesses that really sell great products that could be sold through e-commerce that need the help being found by consumers. So we're starting to think through what could it look like where are our avenues where it might make sense to bring food in. So to answer your question, it's like a little sand in a shell that's starting to dig its way in.
Well, it's just interesting. I mean, I guess one of the reasons I keep coming back to it is because I see the connection between what you're doing and the food business, which is what I write about for the most part.
Right.
But also now because, I mean, clearly people are connecting to the places they buy food and the people from whom they buy food differently, in the sense that all of a sudden they're using the word essential, which would not have been, 6 months ago. It was important. It made, but not necessarily essential in terms of how people thought about it. And so I do think it changes the way that consumers are going to perceive the places where they buy food, whether it's a restaurant or a bar or a supermarket. But also I think has to change. I think it has to change the way those brands, that grocery store brand or that bar brand or that restaurant brand, think about how they position themselves for consumers. I mean, it just seems to me the word essential has taken on an entirely new meaning. And it seems to me one of the reasons I wanted to do this is when I thought about Trestle, I thought about the whole notion of what is essential to me as a consumer.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to connect with you again, because people are defining it differently. And sometimes it's going to be essential is going to be where can I get toilet paper, but sometimes essential is going to be, no, I think I want to do business with a brand, whatever segment that brand is in, where they reflect my values. I think that's important.
Well, and I think we're seeing that with consumers are at least saying that they are paying attention to how, for example, how companies are treating their employees. So in the case of food and retail, where retail still exists, which is grocery, how are companies protecting their employees? How are these companies protecting their customers when they come in? I think consumers are really very much paying attention to those things, for sure. And to what degree beyond that, even are these grocery retailers able to give back to community? Are they able to help support food banks that need it? I think consumers are paying attention to that. I don't know that we've gotten to the point where we're beyond survival to see that come into play too much, but we at least hear people talking about it. I hear people talking about not wanting to support some retailers over others because they're seeing how they either in their belief, how they believe they should be behaving, and maybe they're falling short of that. So it's still early, in my opinion, but there's maybe some indication that people are going to behave that way in from what I'm seeing.
Well, listen, I think what you're doing is terrific work. I think what you're doing is while it may take longer to build what you envisioned than you originally thought, I think the foundation that you're putting down right now is going to be really important. And I don't know if it'll be top of mind for consumers and brands in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18. I have no idea. If I did, I'd go invest money in the stock market. But I think it's really, really interesting, and I'm so glad we had a chance to catch up. I hope we can. I wish you the best of luck with Trestle. I pay attention to what you're doing, and I hope we can catch up down the road as you continue to grow, because I think what you're doing is great.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for having me on. You're always a delight to talk with. Appreciate it so much.
Take care. Talk to you soon. Take care of that cough.
Yeah, I'll get it looked at right away.
Get a test.
Are those available yet?
I think. Take care. See you soon.
Bye, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.